Okay, so I don't really want to immediately start off the special only way to play guide by revealing that I'm actually an insensitive and discriminating sizist or anything, but I gotta say Grimstroke's sort of big. He's a big boy. Now normally that'd be fine and I wouldn't really have a problem with it, but I wanted to start off this episode with a short little animated skit where Grimstroke meets Sniper and they try and reenact this scene playing behind me with both of their ultimates. Unfortunately, this is what those two characters look like side to side in-game. Welcome to the only way to play Grimstroke, or more aptly, the only way we've figured out how to play Grimstroke well so far, given the fact he's only been in-game for a few hours at the time of writing and a few days at the time of uploading this video. But I guess toe to pig with sif hob ig fef het of dat tov is a bit of a mouthful, so let's just go with the other title. It's been a while since we've had a new hero added to Dota, but as always, with every other hero that's ever been added, no one in the world could define universally what this hero actually does and how you should actually play him without like at least a month since the addition to the game. And considering that right now it's a couple of hours since his addition, let's just go with it, right? If for no reason other than that he's incredibly broken and needing to be taken down a peg by Ice Frog over the next couple of patches. What we can do right now is figure out what he can do right now while he's unpatched and untamed, quickly gain an understanding of him, and then abuse his sheer overpoweredness for a bit of MMR while we have the chance. Because of course, as we all know, MMR isn't a measure of skill, it's a measure of how well you can cheat the system. Case in point, I managed Divine 5 by just spamming Huskar, and I suck! And you could spam Immortal 100 by spamming Grimstroke. All we need to do is figure out how. I would play Grimstroke as a strictly utilitarian utility hero, because that's what he is. I mean, that's absolutely what he is, and I haven't really quite figured out a way to justify playing him mid yet. But you know, I mean, you can be sure I'm trying. And to be fair, there's plenty of people who take Grimstroke mid without reason, but I'd like to think us guys are better than that, right? Each of his spells are great in a vacuum, but paired up with an ally, you can really deliver a 1-2 punch. Before we get into that, let me just elaborate on what his spells actually do. Stroke of Fate is a target point spell with a cast range of 1400. That's about from the middle of the river at mid lane all the way to behind Dire's tier 1. I don't know why I use that as an example. Maybe I'm just really wanting to justify playing him there. It is a 0.8 second cast animation, travels on a straight line like Power Shot, can't be aimed at a unit, just like Power Shot, but unlike Power Shot, for every unit it hits, it deals more damage. How dumb is that? If that weren't enough, it deals 120 base damage at level 1, scaling up to 300 at level 4. Base damage, meaning the damage before any increases. For every unit hit, creep or hero, it increases in damage 16 at level 1 and 40 at level 4. And of course, because it's not good enough already, it also slows for 50% at level 1, 80% at level 4, and for 1.5 seconds at all levels. Now, normally a spell like this would have a hard limit on units it can hit before it stops increasing in damage, and I mean, you're smart to think that, so good on you. Because that would be fair. I would rather that you balance, because by the way that I'm wording this, you absolutely know what I'm about to say next, because nope, of course, Stroke of Fate doesn't have a limit. It can increase in damage to an infinite degree. Stroke of Fate is beautiful in the laning phase for the exact same reason that Power Shot isn't. In every game, at every skill level, the heroes stand behind the creeps. At nearly every angle, you casting this will have it hit all 5 creeps and then the enemy hero, in that order. Maybe even heroes if we're lucky. So let's say we are, right? At level 1, this spell deals 120 damage base, then 16 for every creep hit, then 16 on the hero itself. So for that last hero, you're dealing a whopping 200 damage for 100 mana, at level 1, potentially from 1400 units away. Of course, it's balanced by having an extremely long cooldown, except, oh, no it's not, because you can cast it every 11 seconds. But finally, it's at least balanced out by giving ground vision around any enemy that was hit, and at the end of the wave. Well, I don't think balance is the right word in this context. If you want to experience an orgasm over mathematics, which is something I've been told normal people don't necessarily do, work out in your head how much damage you can deal with this when you're laning against a broodmother. Or don't. Hey man, this is a progressive channel here, you can do what you like. Oh god, do we have to go on, or can we just leave it at that? I mean, without even describing the other spells Grimstroke has, Grimstroke's already more powerful than a hero like poor Lone Druid, right? But then every hero is more powerful than Lone Druid. Here's my only way to play Lone Druid guide. Don't. Wow, look at that! 2 guides in 1 video. Phantom's Embrace is your W. After a 0-second cast animation, you spawn a phantom on an enemy target. When it gets close to that enemy, it silences and deals up to 30 damage a second for either 4 or 5 seconds depending on the level. It's like Sakuchi. If it's attacked 2 or 3 times by any enemy, it's killed. But if it's not killed, the phantom ends the embrace with an up to 360 damage burst of magic. She then comes back and refreshes the spell. So yes, you can chain this forever. Now obviously 4 seconds is plenty of time to deal 2 hits, and 5 seconds is plenty to deal 3 hits, so just by itself we're not necessarily going to be able to have it finish, If only there was a way to guarantee it. But anyway, before we get ahead of ourselves, the Phantom dies if you activate BKB, get disrupted, go supernova, basically anything but Yules. The only thing that happens with Yules is that Phantom gets very, very dizzy. So all up, it deals 160 damage to 510 damage, depending on the level. Level 1 is obviously the shorter one. I mean, you wouldn't deal 510 damage at level 1 and 168 at level 4. That's silly, including the final big burst of damage at the end. What's really fun is that the Phantom has to travel from the target back to Grimstroke in order for it to refresh the cooldown. But it can be disjointed, meaning that you could pull off a sick play where you blink before it arrives back to you, and it just disappears and you lose out on any benefits. A good example of when too high of an APM can be a bad thing. You have, by all accounts, like Bill Murray in Space Jam, played yourself. Ink Swell is your E. Again, it's a unit targeted spell, but on allies this time. On cast, you can bathe you or your ally in ink for 3 seconds, causing that person to move 30% faster, but also silencing and disarming him, as well as making them immune to attacks. Not spells though. It's not like Dark Willow's Shadow Realm, unfortunately. It's a little worse than that, but still, you could dive towers with it. During those 3 seconds, any hero within a 400 radius of you will be damaged by up to 55 damage per second, and after those 3 seconds, anyone in the radius will take a stun, and damaging nuke proportional to the amount of damage Ink Swell amassed in those 3 seconds. You'll notice it doesn't really specify how that proportional thing works, so let's just whip out a calculator, right? Okay, so this is what it seems to be. The maximum amount of damage and stun that we can do is about 400 damage and 4 seconds in an AoE. While it says on the tin that Inkswell deals 55 damage per second, what it's actually doing is dealing 11 damage every 0.2 seconds, which then becomes 55 damage per second. There is a damage instance every 0.2 seconds for a total of 15 damage instances during the entire 3 seconds. And to deal max damage and stun, Inkswell needs to total 30 damage instances. So yes, this means that if you are only next to 1 enemy hero, it will never do full damage. If you're next to 2 for the entire duration, you will. If you're next to 4 for 1.5 seconds each, you will. And if you're next to 50,000 creeps, it won't do anything past the initial DPS, because creep instances don't count towards the final big boom. What's sort of nifty is that even upon dispelling the spell, the stun and damage will go off. It'll just calculate how many damage instances it counted between the beginning and when it was prematurely cut off. It'll always stun. Now, if only we could find an ally that isn't afraid to die, isn't afraid to be disarmed due to lack of any actual attack damage anyway, someone who doesn't really mind being silenced for 3 seconds, and someone that could benefit from essentially being hasted. And you know what? Here's another thing. If we could only find an ally that does all of this, and is also controllable by us. A real conundrum there. Let's come back to this. Fun fact, Inkswell has these particles that hit heroes when they're in range, right? Fun fact, these same particles still appear when the enemy is invisible, which means that you can do stuff like this. And then Soulbind is of course the big ultimate. It's the one thing that they showed in the trailer for him, and it's understandably the one thing that you should probably put the kettle on to talk about. We're going to be here for a while. If you're not a fan of tea or coffee, maybe skip putting the kettle on and instead just get some kettle corn in a big bowl and get comfortable. You ready? Soulbind is a unit targeted ability that affects enemy heroes. It doesn't have to be cast on an enemy hero, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Upon cast, Soulbind will link your target with its nearest hero ally within 550 radius, preventing them from separating. Imagine it like a two-way slug pounce. It has up to 900 cast range, a 45% slow, an 8-second duration, and it's completely undispellable. Without it doing anything else, it is, right now, an 8-second BKB piercing 2-man slow. But it does do something else. And you know it does something else. The catch is, of course, that any unit targeted spell that is cast on one person in the Soulbind is also cast on the other. And not just from Grimstroke, all heroes. And not just from hero spells, all spells, including items. Oh boy. Okay, let's talk about it. Okay, first off, as I said, you don't need to target a hero for it to work. You can target anything, including creeps and illusions, which means that you can actually use it as an undispellable 8-second finder and marker of the real PL. If there's a big mob of PL illusions and the real PL is definitely among them, you can just cast Soulbind on any of the illusions, and the game itself will tell you which one the real one is by linking him to that illusion. If you manage to randomly select the true PL himself, that's even better. It won't make a chain, but it will give a debuff icon right above the guy that he cannot get rid of, even with Doppelganger. For 8 seconds, that PL can do nothing but run around with a giant icon above him, and he can even reattach the chain to a new target if he accidentally runs within 550 range of another hero, because yes, even after breaking once, the spell keeps checking, and if you break the chain only to walk into another allied hero, the chain reappears and locks you to them. Having said that, it doesn't link to invisible or invincible heroes, like Ones and Cyclone. With that in mind, you can cast it on a creep, tether that creep to an enemy hero, then Midas the creep and also Midas the hero, insta-killing him and then being awarded thousands and thousands of golden XP. No, I'm just kidding, you can't actually do that as much as I really wanna. It gives True Sight to anyone linked, as well as giving Grimstroke and his team the same vision that the enemy target has. If that enemy target is on the high ground, now all of a sudden we can see from the high ground with his vision. The way I worded it, it might make you think they would be able to see their ward vision and tower vision and all that, but nah, those units count as their own things, so we're only acquiring the around 1800 day vision or 800 night vision of the two units that we snag. So pretty neat, right? It is possible, although very hard, to break the chain with force movement. The only problem with that is, of course, the fact that the chain will just jump to the next closest ally in the radius. So that rules out things like Pudge hooking out his friend to safety, because in doing that he's just making himself the new tether target, unless he was to do something like blink during a hook, but that's getting pretty out there, right? To break the chain, you need to travel more than 700 units away from the other person. The problem is, at 550 units you get down to 0 movement speed. So there's the riddle. How do we get to 701 units apart from 550 units apart? And if you answered any of Skewer, Leap, Pounce, Tree Dance, Primal Spring, Phoenix's Sunray Movement, Force Staff, or Hurricane Pike, you are wrong, actually, because these spells are actually trumped by the Soulbind Chain. Force Staff can only work in this very, very specific angle where both of you are pushing against the 550 mark and facing directly away from each other, then one of you casts it. Fortunately, every other form of force movement works. Hook, of both the meat and shot varieties, Rolling Boulder, Fire Remnant, Life Break, Tether, Waveform, Rolling Thunder, Icarus Dive, that sort of thing. And considering there are 117 heroes in Dota, odds are probably against you having a way to break it. Sorry. What's funny is that Soulbind doesn't work with allied spells. Dazzle can't Shallow Grave, Oracle can't do any of his spells, Omni Knight can't do all of his. That kinda sucks, right? Like, not necessarily because it would be balanced, but more just because it'd be fun. It'd honestly be a really nice touch for Soulbind to do what it actually says it does on the tin, and allow any unit to target spell that either receives to also be cast on the other hero. It's what it says it does, man. And who would argue that giving Soulbind the ability to actually be utilized by the enemy team in order to save the people in Soulbind would be a bad thing? I mean, sure, maybe it brings the potential of the spell down for Grimstroke, but man, oh man, it'd up the skill ceiling for anyone going against him. You'd actually have to be smart and proactive to consider the fact that you could actually save soulbound allies with your heals. I, for one, am all for it. Before we get into it, though, ask yourself what should happen with status resistance upon casting spells with Soulbind. Because I can probably guarantee that what you're imagining should happen and what actually happens is not the same thing. It gets weird. So oh, what's that I hear? Is that the Whispers of Guile's theme? Well, that can only mean one thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for a montage. Let's stop talking about all the spells Soulbind doesn't work with, and let's start talking about all the spells that it does. Well, with. Here is every neat interaction with Grimstroke, Soulbind, and any other single target spells. Take it away, Guile. Firstly, along with allied heroes, turns out dominated neutral groups can't cast spells that double up with Soulbind, so I guess we've uncovered that it's probably hard-coded to be spells that only originate from units classified as heroes, which would mean creep heroes would also count, right? Unfortunately, there's only 7 of them, and of those 7, only 2 actually cast targeted spells. Well anyway, in the interest of not boring you to death, as well as having this video be less than 9 hours long, any interaction that is literally just, it doubles up, I'm gonna skip. Let's go! Abaddon's Mist Coil damages Abaddon twice! Batrider's Lasso with Ags can catch up to 4 targets if the 2 tethered ones aren't too close to each other to just be the one snagged by Lasso's secondary pickup. With Grimstroke and Refresher, you can snag up to 8. Perfect when you're tryharding in a Dota 10v10 match. Bane's Fiend's Grip should just be part of that rule I stated earlier where it just doubles up, but it sort of gets wacky, because yes, you're channeling Fiend's Grip on 2 people, but this is probably a bug. If one of the grips is dispelled, which can happen, it happens a lot, the other one doesn't get dispelled. Even though your channeling animation stops and the channeling bar stops too. Really weird, right? It's almost as if that second guy is being gripped without us needing to stand still to channel it. But it can't be that simple and fun, right? Or what's actually happening is that you're still channeling. It doesn't look like you're channeling, but you are channeling. If you take a step, the second grip breaks. And yes, it's probably a bug, but that does not mean it's going to be fixed anytime soon. Beastmaster's Primal Roar might actually just push the two targets far enough away from each other that you accidentally just break the soulbind chain. Be careful with it. Obviously in this hypothetical game where a Beastmaster is played and also manages to hit level 6, but that's just silly. That'll never happen. Oh god, Bounty Hunter's Ag Shuriken Toss does something wacky too. In fact, so do all spells in the same vein, like Paralyzing Cast and Lich's Chain Frost. What happens is that normally Ag Shuriken bounces back through all tracked enemies, and normal Shuriken without Ags, with Soulbind, sends 2 Shurikens. So in this scenario with Soulbind and non-Ag Shuriken Toss, the soulbound enemies would be hit 4 times, right? Once from normal Shuriken, once from normal Shuriken hitting the opposite enemy and reflecting back, and 2 more times from the second person Shuriken doing the same thing. Okay, alrighty. Well now let's just add in Ags, right? And watch this. Oh. You think that's bad? This is what happens with Cask.
Consider the coconut.
You know how I said Brewmaster's Broodlings can probably cast spells because they're technically creep heroes? Turns out, nope. This one's pretty obvious, but just to warn you, Centaur's Double Edge self-damages Centaur twice, so be careful. Death Prophet's Spirit Siphon is straight broken, like every charge-based ability in their own way. Siphon is broken because the person you cast it on won't get it, but the second guy will. What? Haskar jumps from the first target to the second, taking self-damage for both. He'll always end up at the second one, so just keep that in mind if you're wanting to make a getaway. Juggernaut's Omnislash, just like every spell that involves physically attacking, won't work. That includes Charge of Darkness, Focus Fire, Nether Strike, and Razor's Static Link, but probably for different reasons. Probably balance reasons. But then there's LC and a Jewel, and this just gets mind-bending. Okay, so both get jeweled at the same time if LC jewels one. Both will attack LC, but LC will only attack the first. She will proc a Moment of Courage on account of that second one attacking her, which is good and actually pretty smart, although you'd have to be pretty ballsy or snowballing out of control to literally have a 2-on-1 brawl with the enemy team. If LC kills that first target, she gets the damage. The second target's duel also ends, and LC gets that duel's bonus damage too. If LC loses, however, both of her targets get bonus damage. And if that's not confusing enough, if LC has Ags, both targets are completely immune to outside damage, but can still take damage from LC. But get this, LC is immune to all damage, including the 2 people she's dueling. And it actually makes complete sense if you imagine like a Venn diagram in your head, right? On the left is target A, on the right, target B, and in the middle is LC. And this is the 2 jewels. It's every single person in a jewel and who is in which jewel. Okay, right? LC's Ags makes it that anyone outside of a jewel can't deal damage in a jewel. And what LC is effectively doing is casting 2 jewels on 2 people at the same time. So that would mean that target A can't deal damage to LC, who is in a separate jewel with target B, because it'd be an outside force. And the same for target B to A. Neither can damage LC, and LC can damage both. Your head hurting yet? Lich's Chain Frost throws the second one after the first one, and they independently bounce around 11 times each, so 22 damage instances all up. Wow, that was refreshingly simple. Lion loves Soulbind. I mean, every single spell that he has is a single target spell, unless they become AoE, in which case, I mean, obviously they're not. So, yeah, even Earthspike when ground cast works, and Earthspike being a unit targeted spell that is also AoE, which is a rare thing, means that one person can be hit by both of the spikes given good enough positioning. Medusa throws 3 snakes for no reason. I don't know why. I mean, it's an odd number. How does that even work, right? I'm not complaining or anything. You can steal upwards of 1 billion mana in one go, I think. But the fact is, like, I don't know how it works, and it sort of irks me. Leave it in the comments if you know. If you don't know, leave it in the comments that you don't know. If you don't know but you want to come across as smarter than you are, just take a wild guess in the comments. If you want to say hi to me, leave it in the comments. If you want to talk about Artifact, send your emails to I hate Artifact and all it stands for, but there's probably a lot of money in it, so I'll probably play it on this channel and pretend to love it at gmail.com. Morphling's Adaptive Strike with a level 25 talent, throw 6 of them. Morph only copies the first target. I mean, you can't be 2 heroes at the same time. That makes sense. Odie's Astral Imprisonment works like a charm. Because they come out at the exact same time, both will be hit by the other's astral damage. PA's Dagger does the same as Morphling and as Adaptive Strike. She'll throw 6 daggers, any or all of them, possibly containing a 4k crit. Yikes. Pudge's Dismember works like Bane's Fiend's Grip, and because of the way that it brings people forward, that other guy who's like miles away will also be brought forward by it. Wagner's Life Drain does the suck on both targets at the same time. Rubik's Spellsteal didn't work, because of course it didn't. If nothing else, them boys at Valve know to check any new spell's interaction with Spellsteal. It's like an SCP that has to be contained and monitored constantly, and the one patch where they don't check it will be the Apocalypse, and that's how I assume Dota will end. Skyrod's Arcane Bolt throws out 4 with a level 15 talent, it throws out 8 with that and eggs for 90 mana. Pretty good. Sniper, of course, does this. Tinker with a laser deals about 900 billion damage pure, also pretty good. Vengeful Spirits is fucking confusing, so just know that by the end of it, Venge will be where the first target was, the first target will be where the second one was, and the second one will be where Venge was. I hope. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Visage's Soul Assumption straight up breaks irreparably, so I'd be careful with ever casting it. The only cure is death, which, like, isn't really a cure, right? Warlock's Fatal Bonds stacks, dude. Disgustingly powerful, and Winter's Curse does the same as Duel. The two enemies will fight each other, but not be able to deal damage to each other. And of course, if you're Terrorblade, this is what Sunder does with Soulbind. Okay, now that we're done with what must feel like a complete sensory overload of information, let's just assume your brains are all sloshed around and malleable enough, because I want to take this opportunity to lay down something you'd probably consider a terrible idea if you were of sound mind. Before we get to that though, with all the preliminary discussion on what Grimstroke spells actually do, here's our build. It's a toss-up between getting Q first or E first. If you're contesting runes and against 2 enemies, Inkswell can potentially deal up to 295 damage, which is somehow fair. But the parameters for that to occur are a bit hard to come by, so we normally just get Stroke of Fate. I personally would get Inkswell as a value point as soon as I can anyway, so I can be using it as an escape for me or my teammates, as well as a neat little way to dive beyond a tower to finish someone off. And either Max Embrace if I know they can't really kill the Phantom, or Inkswell if I think they can. Honestly, it's not too much of a problem considering both spells are sort of insane. A point in Inkswell's favour is when my lane partner can go invisible or be otherwise unperturbed while he's barreling down lane running at the enemy. Weaver's good for this, Ricky, Treant, maybe Necrophos, that sort of thing. And then obviously Soulbind at level 6, and whenever else you can get it. There's no real standout winners or losers when it comes to talent, so let's just say 90 GPM, 125 cast range, plus 2 hits on Phantom, and plus 200 Inkswell radius. But honestly, you can make a pretty good case for the alternatives at every one of those levels. Start off the game by planning for the offlane, pick up a Mango, Clarity, maybe more than one. There's nothing that really screams urgent pickup, and as of right now, we're not really that item dependent. So maybe even just be the courier and wards guy if your position 5 would rather start with a Windlace. The general strat in the early game would be to make use of your long range attack, and the uncomfortably long range of all of your spells. Whether you're playing him as the offlane core or support, you should probably be making sure that the other teammate is closer to the action than you are. When that's the case, you have the ability to Inkswell to save him, Stroke of Fate from range to help him, or Phantom's Embrace while the enemy team is distracted by him. I'd personally play Grimstroke as a core. Among other things, it just lets you have a reason to attack the creeps as well as the enemy hero by throwing Strokes of Fate. Stroke of Fates? I don't know. Anyway, whatever you'd call it, if you were a support, chucking that on the enemy creeps would summon complaints from your laning partner saying, "You're messing with the last hits!" But chucking it on just the enemy hero would have him say, "Why aren't you tossing it through the creeps to hit him? It does more damage!" Sorry, I guess that's my impression of Dota players? I've never heard a Dota player sound like that though. Anyway, can you see why I'd normally want to play him as a core? Speaking of core, after you farmed up a bit of gold, let's dart into the side shop for a Ring of Health. Good sustain, cheap regen item, and it builds a Helm of Dominate. Because yes, we go in there. Man, as a basic intro to Grimstroke, this is already getting seriously long-winded, so just, with Helm of the Dominator, we can surge our dominated creep, throw Inkswell on him, and not worry about him dying. Bonus points if it's a Centaur or a Tomato creep, so we can follow up all the damage and stuns with some damage and stuns. It's also just passively a lovely aura and a way to push your guaranteed early game lead into a mid-game win. When we come back to Grimstroke for a deeper analysis, we'll talk more about this, but for now, it's just pretty good. If you're a support, you can go Medallion or Urn, as long as you bear in mind that those unfortunately don't work with Soulbind, which is fair, I guess, but it'd be a lot cooler if they did. And then to make matters worse, I also suggest Halberd on an end hero. Yeah, I know. It's cheap, gives great stats, and can disarm. Not only is that good for guaranteeing phantom embrace refreshes, it's also useful during soulbinds. It's just a neat item. The passive slow is nice, stats are nice, the evasion's nice. It's just nice. After that point, you can honestly just go whatever. As I said at the very start, I'd play Grimstroke as a utility hero. A utility hero, by his very nature, would be the one adapting to the environment of the game. If you need roots, he'd get Atos. If you need heals, he'd get Greaves. If you need some YOLO plays, he'd probably already be halfway to a Divine Rapier. And if you want happy little trees painted, you'd probably want to ask someone else. This guy only paints in red. And not like because it's blood or anything, he's just clearly misplaced his easel, and his brush only has red on it, which is a bit unfortunate. Oh well, at least he's trying. Bob Ross would be proud. Just before we wrap up, a couple of things to keep in mind. Soulbind isn't actually really one of those spells that you'd actually need to get at level 6. It's not like Storm Spread's Ball Lightning or anything. It's not a spell that you desperately need because you want to become Grimstroke. You're already Grimstroke, you don't need it. It's a spell that benefits from looking at your games on a case-by-case basis. If you are a mid, or solo laning, or you have no allied heroes with maxed out single target spells, which, hey man, could happen. You could be in a game with completely AoE heroes, but if that were to happen, getting Soulbind ends up just being a glorified 2-man BKB piercing slow. Still good and all, but not drop everything to pick this up good. Because of the way that we build Grimstroke, and because he only has one enemy targeting single target spell, you could honestly just wait to get Soulbind until Phantom's Embrace is leveled up fully. And on that note, if you're wanting Soulbind at level 6, you can plan ahead and max out Embrace over Inkswell in preparation for it, you know? Soulbind plus Embrace means that 2 are cast and only one of them needs to not die for Embrace to refresh. In fact, you can even use the spell on creeps while they're preoccupied so as to constantly have it up. And that's coming at the end of this video, which lends itself to the idea that I've only just thought about it. I'm really making it apparent that Grimstroke's got so much to talk about still with him, aren't I? I mean, we just spent like a year talking about all the ally combos with Soulbind, but there's also pretty much the same amount of combos with Inkswell. For efficiency's sake, just consider this, right? Inkswell makes your target unable to be attacked, which means it's perfect against Legion Commander's Duel, Clinks' Strafe, Ursa jumping in on you or the target, and Winter Wyvern's Winter's Curse. I mean, in reality, after all this, the only heroes that really beat out Grimstroke are just heroes that trample magic damage heroes anyway. Anti-Mage with his Resistance and Blink, Omni-Knight with his Repel, Razor in a pretty major way because he purges Inkswell immediately, and I don't know, the River, your ink could get all diluted. Right? I'm done. So in conclusion, these are the absolute basics when it comes to playing Grimstroke. After this entire video, we've achieved simply scratching the surface, and to most that might just be enough. You know enough to not lose, which in reality is all you'd really need for a Dota game. You don't need to win by 100 kills or win in 20 minutes, you just need to win. You could win by a millisecond during a base race, as long as you win, it's not a loss. I know, crazy, right? All of these insane facts and more on the next episode of The Only Way to Play. And for those of you who want to delve a little deeper into Grimstroke's potential, let me rest a little bit, would you? We'll come back to this guy once the dust of 1,000 patches is settled. Who knows, by the end of all this, he might be a completely different hero. But while he's not, get out there and enjoy some free MMR. Hello from the other side of Dota 719C. It seems like just the sort of thing that I do, right? Finish a video and then have an update come out in between recording that part and the outro part. Well, hi, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's Grimstroke, but what's actually a bit of a rip is that I uploaded this to Patreon a couple of days ago as a sort of like early bird bonus, which I clearly really didn't think out, because turns out if I deliberately wait to upload videos to the public, they sort of get out of date. Who would have thunk it? So right off the bat, Grimstroke is now, I think, Inkswell doesn't disarm, doesn't silence, but doesn't make you immune to attacks. So instead of using it defensively, you'd use it offensively. I don't know, sort of like a really, really damaging Omni-Knight Repel. That's probably good, right? That's the same way you'd want to use it. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't script this bit. You can tell how much I don't know about anything in Dota if I don't script it out first. Well, anyway, the system's in place, and as much as it's a bit of a tease, if you wanted to watch this and all of my other videos 2 days early, then go to patreon.com/edge and pledge. You can become a pledger. Do you get it? Appreciate it, and any tier allows for getting videos early, so just chuck $1 per video and you're golden. But, I mean, you guys already know that because I say this every video outro. And of course, next I say, this particular video was brought to you by these awesome pledges. Chris Sir 1996, Foxy fucking Loxley, Generic Eric Fan number 274 XD Roar, Mine Siege Towers, Ninny Bottoms, Asbestos, Sex God, I Eat Ass but in German, Kim Nelson, Lincoln, Shadow Sweetheart, Squirty McFlirty, Tefetu, Adam, I didn't play this game, McAllister, AEJ, Carbon Bond, Christian Gunetti, Christian Rudder, Dapper Bucket, English Breakfast Tea, Froxilico Magic Man, Grumman, hey! That's pretty good. It's Coup de Grace, for fuck's sake. Jolly Jew Giant, Keegan Mayer, King Gizzard and the Shitty Wizard, Kyle, Leon Silver, Tsunami Shadow, Milocott, Mini Shoof, Much Skill Very Pro WoW, Neutral Platonic, Land-Based Vertebrate, Orange Filter Sky, Paul Moran, Peyton Dean, Procrastination Studios, Pro S, Puneeth P, Raphael Silva, Rhett Mitchell, Rick Flareon, woo! RJ shouldn't have to play position 5 every game, Ruger Fleur, Shiva's Guard, Scar, Spencer Davis, Sterile Cheryl, Taco God, Boondog, The Chocotaku, Thomas Johnston, Thomas Langley, Wazer 107, Yabus McGee, and yeah, Anime Titty.